and more. Students enjoy small class size, close relationships with faculty, and immersive study. Wesleyan.edu/. You're listening to 88.1 FM WESU Middletown, a community service of Wesleyan University. Up next is The Business Buzz with Jeff Sherman, taking a look at innovative and cool technology and businesses right here in Connecticut. Catch The Business Buzz each and every Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. as part of our Monday through Friday 4 p.m. local talk block, only on 88.1 FM WESU Middletown.
The Business Buzz on WESU is proudly sponsored in part by Carlson and Demir, located right here in downtown Middletown. Carlson and Demir providing legal representation for victims of serious injury and for those facing criminal charges. On the web at carlsondemir.com, 860-819-1034.
Well, welcome to WESU, and we have Marty Kina and Chris Calandra in Studio B, and it is our pledge drive, Marty. Maybe you can tell our listeners why it's so important to be a listener in good standing and donate to WESU.
Well, not only are you going to be a good listener in standing, but you have an opportunity to use your voice. You know, certainly in a world that we have where there's an awful lot of yelling going on and people not listening to some people and some people beginning to decide that they would rather keep their thoughts to themselves because sometimes it's not well received. I think anybody who's listened to the Buzz over the years that we've been here recognizes that it's a forum that any point of view is allowed, and it gives us a opportunity to have a conversation with our community. And our community is expanding, you know, now that we're on the internet, and we get calls from all over the place now. We've had guests from as far as Indiana. If you recall, we had some farmers on not so long ago talking about how they were trying to make a go of it. So the topics are wide-ranging, and it's a forum where people can have an opportunity to share their ideas and oftentimes talk about topics that aren't normally brought forward.
Well done, Mr. Kina and Chris Calandra in Studio B. Your little insight into why people should donate to WESU during our current pledge drive.
Well, I want to do that under complaint because it's hard to follow.
I don't think your mic's on.
Is my mic not on?
Something's not right.
Is that better?
Sounds a little echoey.
Did you hear me?
I heard you fine.
Okay. Well, that's even better.
So, is it good at all?
Not really.
So I was going to say that it's unfair they had Marty go first and me second because Marty was so good. I don't know if I could equal the representation on how important WESU is to the Wesleyan community, the Middletown community, and just Hartford County in general. Having a local voice, local listeners, local business owners, and a wide variety of shows that are on air here is not something you're going to get in the mainstream press. It's really important, and your support is very much welcome.
Excellent. Let's try your other microphone. Let's see if that works again.
Is that much better?
No, it's not. I think you might have to join me in Studio A, quite frankly.
It's
like match game.
I see a coup here.
It's a coup attempt. So, Marty, I'm starting out on a little. Well, you need to bring a chair. It is our fun drive. We have brand new.
We have to buy furniture.
You can bring a chair because it is our fun drive. So, no, you don't want to do that, do you? All right. So let's see how we're all in process here.
maybe a new chair is on the wish list here if we were able to get some funds.
Let's see. Now you can talk.
Look at that. Seamless?
There you go. A seamless operation. So let's start out, Chris, thank you for joining me in Studio A. With a little lighter note. Talked about last week about baseball and how I know it's early in the season, but a lot of the, let's say, B markets like Arizona and others, even Chicago, I think they had 900 fans in a game, are really kind of hurting.
Very much so. We've talked about it. We've talked about it on air a few times over the years that I think we're all in agreement, the three of us, that baseball is on the decline. It may not be readily noticeable because it's such a big business, but I've tuned into a few games here and there, and it is notable. There'll be somebody at bat, and behind them, it looks like it's a Little League game.
The question,
but it's also snowing in many of those markets.
That doesn't help.
But the long-term trend has not been good. And the question, Mr. Calandra, is it really sustainable with these high salaries?
I do not believe it's sustainable with the high salaries, and the youth of America are not engaged in baseball, either watching
I think that's
it,
a huge
rooting
thing
for
because
it, playing it.
Being older than you, but I don't know how it was when you were a kid. We actually played hardball, believe it or not, in the parks.
Sure.
And now if
In
you
the
go by a
backyards.
park, it ain't happening.
Yeah, I like you said, am much younger than you are. But we would go and you'd play.
You're still
You'd play,
better looking, though.
You'd play pickup games. You'd play home run derby. If you didn't have enough kids, you would play like half the field.
Ghost runners.
You do running bases. You do all that stuff. I have a 12-year-old son. Nobody he hangs around with does any of that, let alone play in a formal Little League. The Little League in town where I live is shrinking, and it's being elbowed out by the likes of soccer, lacrosse, and other athletic pursuits.
It's interesting because even when I was a kid, my best friend and I used to just play catch after school all the time. Now, if you don't play it, I don't think you're going to have the interest as a fan. That's the problem.
Absolutely.
It's not being passed down generationally, so you're starting to see that a little bit. Plus, I also believe that it's getting passed down culturally. I think if you look at a lot of the lineups, ethnically, it's Latin ball clubs are being very successful. I think most of the rosters are drawing from the Caribbean and other Latin countries. So
that's one of the problems with Major League Baseball because there's no. You don't have the Mickey Mantles, whatever, Tom Seavers. It's people that really can't relate to, so to speak.
No, I think that's true. And I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout-out to Salvatore Romano, who's a Southington, Connecticut kid who's pitching for the Cincinnati Reds and is in their rotation. He's had a number of quality starts this year. I've had the pleasure of knowing him a long time. He's a very impressive young man, aside from being a terrific pitcher.
Most of the kids that signed from around the Hartford County area are Cincinnati folks, and we must have a very active scouting combine because if you go all the way back to Dibble, he was a Red, and even when I was a kid, the kids that were coming out of my town were signing with Cincinnati. So there must be some type of a pipeline here in the Hartford County, Hartford, Connecticut region.
No question about that. Now, a couple of days ago, interesting, I saw the movie Chappaquiddick. And I found it amazingly interesting, and I thought that if Ted Kennedy was not a Kennedy or a liberal, Chris, his chances of surviving politically would have been what?
I think it would have been,
Zero.
very small, and maybe even in today's 24/7 news cycle, it
never
be
would have made it,
something,
no.
But was this a documentary, or is this a movie with lots of Hollywood license in terms
that
of...
I don't. That's a key question. I do know from a friend of mine whose father was a really cool guy and actually did the whole thing, brought him to Chappaquiddick, see, basically how, how it could happen or whatever. And I do know that Ted did not report it for, a whole day.
Yeah.
So that's basically, if it was you or I, you'd be in jail, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I think that neglect is what really caused the death because it was more of a drowning than a problem with the car.
Plus, if the movie's accurate, to Chris's point, you could stand on the car. I thought, when I was a kid, I thought it was 12 feet of water.
Right.
It was 10 feet of water. And you're telling me you don't have the, whatever to rescue this lady?
Yeah,
Hello?
because he just left the car and left is it Mary?
Mary Jo Popechny, yeah.
And just left her there and then went home to sleep it off or something like that.
And I can't understand politically, like, how he even survived for the 20 years that he was viable, let's say 69 to maybe 89, and then he just became a drunk. But, how he actually ran in 1980, that's only 10 years later. Are you kidding me?
Well, nothing surprises me in the Senate any longer. You could look around right now and you'll wonder next year, well, how did they get reelected? So,
well, it does show that when we look at today and you criticize, as we do, I know I do, our politicians today, there is a proud tradition of some unsavory characters representing us in Washington on both sides of the aisle, and I think Mr. Kennedy certainly fits into that.
The lion of the Senate.
Mm-hmm. His accomplishments are amazing. Anyway, so in the news, it seems like the Mueller investigation is still upon us. First Chris, then Marty. I believe that it is a concerted effort by the establishment to unseat a duly elected president that is outside the establishment, and that's what it's all about. Because you're telling me you can't wrap up an investigation in a year?
It's more than a year now, right? Yes, I agree with you, especially because other things where you see that the government or the FBI is investigating, stuff gets maybe not wrapped up, but you get a lot of information.
I mean, you have a year to do this, Chris. I find it hard to believe. And I also think that in the end, like Trump or not, obviously he has personal problems, with the affairs and all that kind of stuff. His first year as president, even though he had got no support really from anyone, was pretty impressive. What do you think, Chris?
I think it was a very successful first year, and I agree with you that it seems
so
to
my
me,
point is, I'm sorry, but is he really calling the establishment, the emperor has no clothes, how really incompetent they are? Now you have 4% growth. You have full unemployment. Standing around the world is exponentially better than it is. Is that embarrassing for certain people?
I think his behavior is embarrassing.
No. Oh. No, his success embarrassing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And my view is the press goes out of their way not to identify any success. They do not, going back to the baseball discussion, they do not call balls and strikes at all. It is completely 100% Donald Trump is bad. But the economy is doing very well.
Does that concern you that you have a press that is not really has abdicated their responsibility as a free and independent press? I mean, anyone, even if you're ultra liberal, you'd have to say, "Hello."
It's horrible. For the life of me, I can't understand why they can't have a show where they spend a few minutes talking about, hey, Trump is presiding over a very strong economy. Look at this, and this is good. These are things to be worried about. And then have another segment where they hammer him about this, that, or the other thing. That would be fair. That's what I want from the press. No, they will ignore the good and exclusively talk about the bad.
Last question before Marty joins in. Do you feel that maybe it's the East Coast, West Coast kind of a thing? They're in a bubble because if you look at CNN's ratings, they're basically in the tubes. So in other words, they think they're in an echo chamber.
Sure.
They're going to the same cocktail parties in San Francisco and Martha's Vineyard. They think they're just getting all these accolades, whereas mainstream America has basically said, This has become ridiculous.
I believe that's true. It goes back to that's why it was so surprising. Donald Trump won the nomination and won the presidency was because the coast in New York, the media centers, they're all talking amongst themselves. I know, Jeff, I spent a lot of time in northern Florida. I have an office there. I'm typically there once a month, if not more. And the culture there, the conversation there is fundamentally different than it is in Connecticut, which is much more of a liberal-oriented state and part of the New York media market.
Well, actually, I think in Connecticut, it's funny because I've known some people, like let's say initially, and they'll say how awful Trump is. And when you get to know him, they're like, well, yeah, he's really not all that bad. I wonder, like even now he's at 50%. I wonder if it's really not more than that.
What, approval rating?
Yes.
I don't think it's 50%.
Yes, Rasmussen, it's 50%.
Is that? Oh,
Yeah,
well.
it is.
Yeah, but to
Others
Marty's
is
point,
lower, yeah.
other polls. But how much do you believe the polls? The polls said that he wasn't going to be president. So
Right.
I don't know if the polls are reflective of what's actually happening in America. I think there might be bias in the way that they compile their.
That's what Dr. Lopkin
metrics.
says, but
Yeah.
he's not smart.
Just like in your baseball analogy, some people want to work with cybermetrics and some people don't.
Yeah.
Some people work from their gut, like the president, and other people look at statistics and think that the numbers will show what.
So, what do you think about Trump's year in terms of not his personal life but his accomplishment? What concerns you the most, Mr. Kina?
Well, if we're going to talk economically, a little bit of the flip-flopping, when we talk about whether we're going to pull in or stay out of, certain economic treaties, like let's say the TPP, that was bad-mouthed, and now, maybe it's not going to be such a bad idea that we participate. So, countries that, we had relationships with, and then, things are said and things are done and actions are taken, and then all of a sudden, well, maybe those weren't the best things to do because it might have been a knee-jerk reaction. I don't know how easy it is to go back and forth on some of these agreements and, the tariffs. If you dig a little bit deeper, perhaps some of the things that are being targeted for tariffs with China are actually hurting the people that are supportive of the president. A lot of the farmers, I know particularly the pork farmers, are taking a big hit because of all of it being imported into China. So, I mean, the fact that coal is rising? No, coal is not rising. The coal industry is dead and the communities of coal are dead. So, I don't understand why we keep having to hear that. So there's some inconsistencies as to, what he wants to do, what are the outcomes going to be, and how far along down the road are they going to be held true to be.
Okay. My view on the trade is that I'm amazed that Trump has the guts to do that, because for 30 years, by the way, these are all written by big globalists, that they're one world kind of order.
Yes.
So let America kind of go down a little bit and let other people catch up was really their mantra. I think for years we've had, Chris, you commented this, unfair trade deals, and I think Trump's the first one to call a spade a spade.
Yes.
It's not easy. It'd be easier for him to just go along with the flow, but he's saying, no, these things are ridiculous.
Yeah, and I find it curious if Bernie Sanders had said what Donald Trump said about trade.
Oh, he'd be a hero.
The left would have celebrated because that would have been viewed as looking out for the little guy on Main Street, your blue-collar worker, your manufacturer.
Well, that gets into the whole point, is the Democratic Party at all in line with blue-collar values?
The only thing that they are in line with is opposition resistance to Donald Trump.
And
But
also
beyond that,
open
everything
borders.
is
No,
pretty
open
fluid.
borders.
Yeah.
Open borders.
Yeah, that is true.
So, Mr. Keenan, as a longtime Democrat, has your party abandoned the middle class?
I don't know about abandonment. I think just it's the middle class itself is being redefined. I'm sure it's a little bit narrower. I don't know if there's as many people in a middle class as there once was. I know I was supposedly brought up in a middle class neighborhood. I find that in our communities they're shrinking. There's an economic disparity now, I think a little bit greater than when we were growing up in the 60s and 70s. Perhaps abandoned in that the job opportunities have changed.
As the Democratic Party moved on, and in other words, if you're for open borders, that hurts working class people, not upscale people, for one.
Well, I think the thing that's helped to upscale people are some of the taxation changes that have taken place over the last legislative process when he supposedly modified the tax laws. I think that's been proven to help the 1%.
I got a pay increase. How about you?
No, nothing.
You didn't?
Well, no.
You better check with your accountant, because
Yeah.
I did.
Well, $30 isn't a price increase. I'm talking about standard of living, giving people an opportunity to own a home, people that have an opportunity to have a job with the proper skills. I think some of the things, as we say, in terms of unemployment rate going down, possibly, if we look at some of the other specifics as to what job opportunities are out there, there's a lot of unskilled labor that we're going to need some of those migrants to come in and help do some of those jobs. That
Actually,
no longer.
That's not really true, because with robotics, unskilled labor is really not something that you really
Well,
need.
you can't put a robot out in the lettuce fields. I'm sorry.
No, but you have enough lettuce workers, I believe. Chris, your comments?
On the immigration issue?
Yeah.
So I do think it is a dividing line in politics.
Do you think it's a winner for the Democratic Party? I don't.
I do not.
I think they're obsessed. And let me ask you, why are they? What it's become? It was something that maybe they were pro. Now it's an obsession, almost over.
Yeah.
It's a religious fervor over mainstream America. I mean, DACA. Now they're talking about everything. Even though Cuomo said he's now undocumented, it's almost like this badge of honor. How did it evolve from Feinstein saying in 1990 that she was actually pro-wall to now you need just open borders? Let me just say one thing and then you comment.
Yeah.
I believe that they have lost the Democratic Party, mainstream America. They need to replace those with immigrants. If they don't, they're finished.
Well, I certainly disagree with it, and they are staking an enormous amount of their party's long-term success on the open borders topic. So
how did it become their shtick?
I don't know. I mean, to me, it seems very reasonable to want to protect your borders, and I think this talking point that they have that if you want to control your border, that you're racist or anti-immigrant and are turning your back on America's history as an immigrant country is completely a BS argument.
No, I think it's an argument for a means to an end.
Yes.
Because they want more undocumented and eventually voters for the Democratic Party. But we'll see what our listeners have to say at 860-685-7700, 685-7700, 685-7700. How did the Democratic Party, for one, evolve from maybe more of a liberal kind of immigration standpoint or stance to completely open borders and basically a borderless country?
I don't know about they want to just open up the floodgates. I think we might find where we're actually responding to if you break it, you bought it kind of mentality that we heard from when we got involved with Iraq, when we got involved with Syria, when we got involved with people that now are homeless, that we've got, such a large percentage of people around the world who are living disenfranchised and in refugee camps. I mean, the problem may not necessarily be at our border now, but it will be at our border.
Doesn't mean we have to open up the borders.
Well, I'm not saying we have to open it up to let the floodgates open, but I think that we do have to take some accountability and bring some people in that we may have had a hand in displacing.
Do you agree with that, Chris?
Not at all.
Not really me either. But anyway, who cares? Anyway, so caller, what do you say? You've been listening to the show.
Yeah, you have a very good show, very topical
and that's
all the
why
time.
People should.
Did you see what just happened in Hungary?
What's that?
Well, the premier of Hungary, Viktor Orban, ran pretty much an entire presidential leadership campaign against George Soros and open borders and
no! Nationalism is huge. That's the big global movement. Merkel is one of the few globalists left. Even France's president is more of a nationalist. Isn't that correct?
Well, the Macron, who's the president of France right now, they kind of got him so Le Pen wouldn't win the election, because otherwise they would have had someone who's really pro-French and against immigration with Le Pen.
But he's evolving into that.
Well, I hope so. But right now there's a new political party, the AfD, Alternative for Deutschland Party in Germany. They just came into the Bundestag, I guess they call it, and Merkel can't even sit in the room and listen to them when they speak because she can't stomach it. And there's been the internationalists, the immigrationists, whatever you want to call them, in this country. Open borders people. What you said is probably correct about the Democrats want votes, and they just use it as identity politics now. If you're against it, you're automatically a racist. And I'm going to tell you, people are getting really fed up.
Yeah, but doesn't it really play? Because I think that this whole agenda, especially in particular by the Democrats and some Republicans, because it's the Chamber of Commerce that wants cheap labor and Democrats want votes because they're losing them. But I think they're really doing the work of big global corporate interests that see a one world global economy, and nationalism flies in the face of what their agenda is, doesn't it?
Well, they just raided a meatpacking plant down in Tennessee and arrested about 80 or 90 illegal immigrants. They didn't even arrest the owner of the company, and I don't understand
Well,
why.
that's one of the problems. I mean, you could cut it off. You don't even need a wall. If you really had E-Verify, you wouldn't have these problems, which to me is perplexing. And I think, in my view, this whole Mueller investigation is really an attempt to overthrow Trump because he threatens the globalist interest, doesn't he?
Well, I agree with that.
Whatever this thing, like we talked about at the beginning, Chris and I in particular, that you can't wrap up an investigation in a year. This thing, it's not about the truth. It's not about finding justice. It's about unseating a duly elected nationalist president, and the liberal globalists cannot have that happen. Isn't this the real?
That's why they hate Putin, because Putin is just the opposite of what the globalists want.
Exactly. So who wins this battle?
What wins the battle?
Who wins this battle, globalists or nationalists?
I don't know, but it's going to get a lot worse before somebody wins it, because there's people. I mean, there's people in this country. When you go on social media and they're just livid and they're not going to take it anymore.
What happens if Trump gets taken out? Is there a backlash, or do people just accept it as, well,
I think if something happened like that. Now, when Trump first, won the election, the anti-Trump people were out doing demonstrations, and you saw, almost equal numbers on the pro-Trump side coming out and demonstrating against him in Berkeley, in places like the heart of that, which is the birthplace of the anti-Trump, whatever you want to call it. And I think if something happened with Trump, I think you'd see those people in the streets, and they wouldn't be walking around with plastic forks, if you know what I mean.
Final question is, what do you think the never-Trumpers, the resistors, what is their biggest fear about Trump? What is that so alarms them? Because I'm a little perplexed about it.
Traditionalism.
What's that?
Traditionalism in every aspect of philosophy. That's what they don't like. They anything that smacks of traditionalism or continuity or whatever you want to call it, they're against it before you even open your mouth, and they call you names, because that's all they have. And a large look, Trump got about 28% of the Latino vote, which the media will never talk about. There's a lot of other people besides white men in this country that are upset, and Trump won the majority of Caucasian women, with Hillary Clinton running against him and the media against him.
Marty, you have a comment for our caller?
I love the fact that he called in and sharing that kind of information and is an informed caller. But it gives us rise to, this is why we have a show like the Business Buzz, where we're the Buzz, where we can talk about stuff like that, whether I agree with it or not. I mean, it does bring up points that oftentimes are not shared, and it makes you think, and that's what we need to be doing.
I like that. Chris, any final thoughts?
No, I think...
Any questions for the caller?
No, I think he brings up a good point.
Do you agree with him that if Trump gets taken out, there'll be a backlash, or do you think it'll just be, okay, it happened?
No, I think there would be a backlash, and I would answer your question, Jeff, is that they are afraid of him because he's an outsider and a disruptive outsider that's messing up this cozy, elite leadership that we've had for far too long.
I think that's well done.
What about the cozy elite at the banks that they've all been taking care of over time?
Absolutely.
So the whole thing, he's got his foot in that same door. He's made millions of dollars since becoming president because of his own properties. So those are things that he was supposed to be divested of. He's not doing that either. So there's a lot of things that, we could be talking about that he's not doing properly. And I'm sure there are some things that he did well, but I think initially the beginning of his term was more about undoing Obama, than doing something for himself. So, I think it was more of a reactionary in that regard. But, down the road, we'll see how things work out. I hope that if something was to happen and the president was removed, that we wouldn't have widespread Charlottesvilles, that we wouldn't have those kinds of, interactions in the streets, because I believe I've read somewhere that many communities, chiefs of police are telling their guys to be prepared with their riot gears and things of that stuff in their cars, just in case things were to come down, to be prepared, because they think that something like that actually could occur.
Caller, any final thoughts?
Just two things. If something like that happened and people thought it was unfair, you'd see lots of Charlottevilles going on, and I would counsel the three of you to review the Hungarian election that just happened. They had pictures of Soros all over the country.
What is the deal with Soros?
You know, how about for what he is?
How does he get?
And that's about all I have to say.
But how does? Wait, I got a question for you. How does Soros have this free reign? He's essentially a revolutionary adjutant. He's taken down economies.
Because he has so much money. He's like Trump in reverse with even more money.
Oh, he's much more money than Trump. Thank you very much, caller. Well, I thought that was an excellent call. 860-685-7700, 685-7700. I think there is a huge cost, Chris and Marty, to this whole investigation because it's actually prevented Trump from being Trump.
Yeah, I mean, it's
put the brakes on his agenda.
They have slowed him
to
down
a crawl,
and I think it is. I think it's terrible. Like you said, you know, I wouldn't say that he should fire Robert Mueller, but I don't see why.
Well, no, he should fire Jeff Sessions, who's dumber than rocks. What a dumb, stupid moron. He is so dumb. I remember he was at this congressional hearing, and they said, "What do you think of Rubenstein?" And he's like, "He's a fine and honorable man." I'm like, "Oh God!" It was a puffball question meant to say he's not doing the president.
Right.
That was the dumbest. Besides firing Comey, Jeff Sessions was Trump's biggest mistake so far.
And the cabinet itself is probably getting in the way of some of the agenda because so many of their behaviors are such that it's taking away from what maybe their mission is or what they have been trying to do. But some of their own behaviors have been such that you go, holy cow, what the heck's going on over there?
What behaviors?
Well, the amount of money that's being spent on frivolous kinds of things, soundproof phone booths and $31,000 chairs and an education secretary who doesn't understand.
The education secretary, yes, is a buffoon. All the
EPA, Interior.
What about the EPA?
Well, I would like to have an Earth down the road that people could actually live in. I think the deregulation of a lot of the air quality standards, the water standards, things of that nature, I don't believe I'd like to live in Flint all my life.
Chris, your comment?
Well, you use a bad example, Marty, because Flint is a function of local governments behaving badly. It's not a federal government issue.
It was more access to water that was affordable, and because of the water, treatment or the pipes themselves that hadn't been able to be taken care of for all those years, there was a problem.
I think there's a healthy balance. I think Obama's EPA shut down. I mean, you couldn't open up a taco stand without. Sure. So there's a healthy balance. 860-685-7700, 860-685-7700. What do you think, Chris, is going to happen with the Cohn investigation? Oh, by the way, something I thought Cohn, he was, Trump and all these very powerful people. He went to Hector School of Law. You know that? You know that, Chris? Yeah. No, it's like Billy Bob's Oh
no.
It's like whatever the.
Can you draw this picture? Send it in.
It's like Breaking Bad. Did you know that, Marty? About his?
I did not. I knew that he had a very limited clientele, but I did not know that he had, not gone to the most prestigious schools like our president had. So, we'll see what happens. He says he's going to take a bullet for the president. We'll have to see if he's got Kevlar.
Are you for the whole thing that it started out as collusion and now it's talking about
it's a three-dimensional chess match right now. I can't even play checkers at this point. But
do you think that's healthy for our democracy is when you can basically launch an investigation to disembowel a duly elected president? It happened under Clinton.
I don't have any of the data that they do. These are federal.
So you're for
I'm for the Constitution.
So
that's what I'm for.
You think it's within the Constitution to have an evolving investigation that can go anywhere?
I'm not sure what the guidelines were set by. When we have the federal government, that the FBI, people who are if you want to talk about traditionalists, these are the people we always look forward and look towards to help us out, and now all of a sudden they're the bad guys.
But Marty, I know we have a caller, but Marty, I'm offended by the fact that what we have now is we identified someone, Donald Trump, that we want to investigate. Normally, you investigate a crime and find out who did the crime. In this instance, they identified who the person is,
and they're looking for the crime.
Going to see if this person or someone close to him committed a crime. That is not in the spirit of America. It wouldn't be right if it was the man on the street, and it's not right that it's the president, that they're trying to find dirt on him just because they want to target him.
And if that becomes the modus operandi or business as usual, then everyone in America should be scared because it's never going to stop. If you're looking in search of a crime, you'll find something. Caller, are you there?
Yes.
Yes, what say you?
Well, I think the problem is that no matter what Trump does, whether you agreed with that yesterday, if he says it, there's liberal factions that are going to oppose him simply because he said it. You look at what he's doing in North Korea. I mean, we don't know how that's going to play out, but the first legitimate conversation we've had about it in 50 or 60
May I ask
years.
you a question about that? Remember you
Sure.
the best and the brightest, the intelligentsia, the people that got us Vietnam, and the list goes on. And let's look at Clinton first, how he had the greatest breakthrough with Madeleine Albright, another genius. And they gave North Korea the money to arm themselves. Isn't that essentially what happened with the intelligentsia? And they were chastising Trump on how he's out of control, he's a madman, he's nuts. But he basically, in the end, didn't know how to play the game.
Well, exactly. I mean, he says things that
to get a reaction.
Don't sound good the first time they come out. I mean, the Rocket Man stuff, all that it doesn't sound good. It doesn't play well. But look at the end result.
Well, it looks like the intelligentsia didn't really learn. But it didn't look like the intelligentsia didn't really learn too much from Chamberlain. They were nicey with all the predecessors of Kim Jong, whatever the heck his name is, and basically gave him billions of dollars, gave him food subsidies. What did he do with it? Create a nuclear program. So who's the genius in the end?
Well, exactly. And the problem is we keep doing it over and over again. I mean, we've been fooling around with North Korea as being a dangerous country for the last maybe 20 years of presidents.
Yeah, at least starting in the 90s, yes. And it hasn't gotten us anywhere, has it?
It's gotten us to the brink of a real problem. I mean,
agreed.
But
it's one thing for a madman to be sitting in a little country and threatening us, but when he can actually hit us, and that's what we created. We allowed that to happen by catering to him
and kicking the can down the road.
Kicking the can down the road until Trump finally picked it up and said, "Okay, let's do something about it." I mean, they should be applauding him on both sides of the aisle for what at least he's attempting to do.
But what up a
conversation
no
one else would have.
You're talking about applauding for doing things, and I think a 4% growth after 8 years of anemic economy under Obama. Basically reasserting her. Why is the press so fixated on taking this guy down? There's got to be a reason.
Well, I think the prior caller who said that it's because he stands for things that the liberal factions, and I think they're different factions, but they're all opposed to it. People who said that we were in favor of a wall, when he says it, it's the worst thing in history. They just don't like conservative viewpoints. I don't think he's that conservative. I think he's somewhere in the middle on a lot of issues. But
isn't it true? Maybe he is in the middle. Could it be that he is in the middle, but the Democratic Liberal Party has gone so far to the left they're unrecognizable than even 20 years ago with Clinton? I mean, it's look
at the Democratic Party. This is not the Democratic Party of Jack Kennedy.
Not even Jack Kennedy. I'm talking about Bill Clinton. It's like it's unrecognizable.
Well,
correct?
When you look at what their issues are immigration, and it's not a rational conversation. It's just rabid conversation about let everybody in. That came out of no place.
Well, yeah, 20 years ago they were for border and security. Just 20 years ago, Feinstein was actually for building parts of the wall. Now it's let them all in, and if you don't, you're a racist.
Well, exactly, and it's the name calling. You can't have a rational conversation. I've got relatives up in Massachusetts. I'm in Connecticut, up in Massachusetts, who, I don't even enjoy having Thanksgiving dinner with them because they just look at me like I'm stupid. Because if I support Trump on anything, I'm clearly a racist. I'm clearly uninformed. I'm unimaginative, and it's just like they won't even listen to the other side of the conversation. And some of these are conversations they would have had 15 years ago and supported these issues.
You're absolutely right. And I think that's in lots of families, that's in lots of communities, and that's how polarizing everything is at this point in time.
And we run this show much differently, and I think that's the charm of our little show here. And caller, don't you think, with going back to North Korea and other issues we could use as other examples, is Trump was elected to be a change candidate to disrupt things, and the North Korea problem has been a vexing one for a long time, and Donald Trump came in and blew up what was being done before and started using other techniques, tactics, rhetoric, and a different approach. Isn't that what he was elected to do?
Well, if people were paying attention, that's why they voted.
Yeah.
And I think enough people were paying attention. That's exactly what he got elected to do.
What do you think's going to happen? What do you think?
Things up in the air and mix things up. He was going to clear out the swamp. He was going to, he's going to deal with these trade issues that he thinks are, improper at an imbalance. He said he was going to deal with North Korea. He said he was going to deal with Iran.
Then what's all the resistance?
Then what's what he said he'd do.
What's all the resistance about? I mean, you look at it. To me, you got a 4% growth. You have full unemployment. You have North Korea coming to the bargaining table. What's the outrage?
I think people just could not believe that we elected Donald Trump.
But is he also maybe proving the establishment as the buffoons they are, because he's getting things done they couldn't do?
Well, exactly. I mean, that's the thing, is they've been fooling around with these issues for years and years and years. He said he wanted to talk about immigration. They talk about immigration every election cycle, and then as soon as the election takes place, they just drop it. And he said, no, I'm not dropping it. And they're like, no, you're supposed to drop it. That's the game we play.
I think you're absolutely. That's the key.
That's a great.
That is the key. The game is, we know. If you're liberal, you say I'm for. Everyone should have an abortion. And if you're conservative, you say, oh no, we got to shut down abortion immediately. Then when you get elected, you don't even do it. One way or another, both of them do the same thing. And they're like, well, buddy, Mr. Trump, you're not actually supposed to do these things. You're supposed to just. Those are just to feed, your constituency. You're supposed to have, have business as usual and to plot America's eventual decline for world globalism, because that's what it's all about, isn't it, caller?
Well, yeah, and you just said something that really struck a chord with me when you say business as usual. I work for a very large corporation in Hartford, and I won't obviously say who it is, but what I'm saying to you right now, I'm not allowed to say that there, because they have a corporate, and it's all of them. They have a corporate mantra that supports the Democrats, and obviously they're
that to me is fascinating, because it used to be corporate America was in the guise of the Republicans. Now it's completely the opposite, and I'm really fascinated how that switched, because it did switch.
Well, it's. And I don't want to get into this, but it's really a question of they've adopted issues like diversity and inclusion. Every single company touts it. They don't actually do a whole lot, because it doesn't look a whole lot different on the workplace than it did probably 15 or 20 years ago when I was starting. But I got to tell you, they've just adopted these social issues as their own, and they're pushing them. And some of them are obviously really good. I'm not, that's why I said I got to be careful when I get into that one. But it's in our faces all day long. Every single company, and they're all doing it.
Well, either the government or we got to go corporate entity is doing this social re-engineering, which is essentially what it is.
I think some of them are doing it because they don't want to lose business. I mean, look at Starbucks the other day. They closed down for 90 minutes. They're going to do sensitivity training on some bias stuff. I mean, that's to make sure that people go in there and continue to buy coffee. So, I mean, if they have these corporate structures where they're trying to promote a particular kind of civil right, I think oftentimes it's making sure that they stay as a viable company and people can keep their jobs.
I certainly do agree with that, actually. And caller, before we let you go, it is our pledge drive. Why should our listeners out there go to the website, WESUFM.org, and click on the donation tab and make a donation? Why is that?
Because you want the station to stay on the air, and you actually are offering. I got to be honest with you. Most of the time when I'm listening to public radio, it's an opinion that I don't agree with, but at least I'll listen. But this is great that you have an opportunity for people to express an alternate opinion on your show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for calling. You have a great weekend. And gentlemen, well, before we get into the next discussion point, we had two great callers so far.
Yep.
We dropped one. We invite our other listeners to call in if you'd like. 860-685-7700. 860-685-7700. The issues of the day, the Trump's year plus in office, the pushback, more than just pushback on his agendas. What does it mean? The state of the Democratic Party. Those are all in play. Or if you want to go something simpler like the state of Major League Baseball, that's all good as well. But Marty, it is the play drive and it is our record drive. Could you please talk to that as well?
I believe it's this Saturday here on campus at Wesleyan University. I would imagine they'll be starting around 9 o'clock in the morning, going through all afternoon. If they will be having a record fair, we have one biannually during the year to promote music generally. We have vendors that come in. There'll be food. There'll be music. The audiophiles from the region will be coming down looking for some cool vinyl. Vinyl is coming back, and so if you are someone who has found their old record player and you want to come down and find something that you can play on it, this will be the opportunity for you to do that.
Fantastic. We do have a caller. Caller, are you there?
Yes.
You're a first-time listener, is that correct?
I am, and I found, as an independent, I live in Connecticut, I found your radio station very informative. I like the fact that as an independent, that Republicans and Democrats and independents can participate and share their comments, what have you. On my end, I believe that, Hillary Clinton did also, that she had all these emails that she deleted, what have you. Trump also has a lot of issues going on, but there are also some positive things that he's been doing in the foreign affairs.
So what is the big pushback against him? You look at foreign affairs. Any objective viewpoint would say the Obama foreign policy was an abject failure. It seems like we're starting to reassert ourselves as a world power. What's all the pushback against Trump?
I don't know. I do agree that it's the first time in history that I find myself being very cautious when I speak with people who are Republicans and Democrats, because it is the first time that I've heard of family, friends that are not in speaking terms due to the polarization.
It is really it's uncanny. I mean, you can really have friends. What do you think? No, you seem like a smart person. What do you think? Because there's always been political differences, but never at this level. What do you think's behind it? I mean, you could lose friendships. You could lose a marriage, maybe. I mean, it's really, during Thanksgiving, there was a whole website on what to say and what not to say during Thanksgiving. How did it get to this level?
I think also, the media has a lot to do with it. And as you recall, in the past, we really had news programs where the information they were giving you was factual. Now you have these pundits, and people do not know what is the truth anymore. And I'm the type, I go on Fox News every day, and I go on CNN News every day, and I also speak 3 languages before, and I also understand, living abroad in Switzerland for 10 years, I understand also how the media works, and I'm not thrilled about these people that call themselves pundits.
Can I interject? I think it's actually dangerous. I'm dead serious about this. I think CNN used to be the authority in news, whatever they say, right? I cannot watch, even if I was a super liberal, how do you watch CNN, Chris, 24/7? I mean, don't you get sick of anti-Trump? It's like listening to your favorite rock group over and over and over. Don't you get sick of it after a while? There's no news. It's a joke.
Yes, and because they have to fill so much time 24/7, they get exercised over things that generations ago would have barely been a blip. on the landscape, but they hype it, they whip people into a frenzy, and they pit Americans against one another in the nastiest way possible.
Caller, do you agree with that? That I think you were kind of onto that. The media is actually pitting one against. They're fueling the fire, aren't they?
I agree, 100%, and I don't think it's good for the country because patriots also are both. You know, we have Republicans, we have Democrats, and we have independents, and we're all Americans, period.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting. Well, thank you very much for the call.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's amazing that when she said, you don't know what's real anymore. I think when you talk about the trolling that's going on, I personally don't get all my news from online sources. I know millions and millions of people do. I think it's been shown that it can be manipulated. Your own information can be manipulated. So it's very difficult, for some people to understand what is real, what is not real, what's been adapted, what's been truthful. Having been home now for a little while with a medical rehab, I actually turn off the TV too because I'm noticing it's just the same information, just a different face, and I just had to turn it off and say, this is enough.
860-685-7700, 685-7700, 685-7700. We're talking about the media, we're talking about media bias, we're talking about Trump, we're talking about investigations, we're talking about everything all relevant in today's world. Now, Chris, I'll throw this question to you. I don't care if you're liberal or conservative. I think what's going on in the media is really dangerous. No, it's very dangerous.
Dangerous, and they have abandoned their journalistic standard. That caller was wonderful. She called in, mentioned that there used to be fact-based news programs, and they probably didn't always get it right, and there probably was some bias, but there were some standards, there was some integrity, there was some calling balls and strikes. The media has completely abandoned that, and part of it's the 24/7 news cycle. Part of that is resistance to Donald Trump, but they're not serving their American customers well. It's an absolute shame.
As we've said many times, when we were growing up, you had 3, maybe 4 choices to go with. If you really wanted a real moderate one, maybe you went to PBS, okay? You had NBC, CBS, ABC. Some of them could be more liberal than the other, so you had not so many options. Now you could probably find about 500 different ways to find your information. And as we said at the beginning of the show, oftentimes you just funnel into that thought process that you are comfortable with. And so you don't get that alternative. And I think it goes back around to what we were saying earlier today about the show. That's what makes the buzz so special is that we've had 3 callers today, and
we just dropped a caller. If you want to rejoin it, you can join us at 860-685-7700, 685-7700. And by the way, for everyone out there, the views of the Buzz is not the views of WESU or Wesleyan University. And we do have our fund drive, and we do have our record fair this weekend. For a fund drive, you need to support this station. You need to go to WESUFM.org, click the donation tab, and make it happen. So, Marty, what do you have? Wait, we have a caller. We might as well talk about your first news item while we take the call.
Okay. Our first news item today would be, let's go back to what we were talking about in terms of baseball. Interesting story about Jose Abreu, who came in by boat to Haiti from Cuba and then came to the United States back in 2013 to play with the Chicago White Sox, where he had a $68 million contract waiting for him. And he realized that he needed to swallow a part of his passport in order to get back into the United States because it had information that might have kept him out of the country. So he literally ate part of it so that he could come and make his $68 million.
Hope it was nutritious. Caller, real quick. You got 1 minute.
1 minute.
Go ahead.
Okay.
What's up?
Well, I'll make a couple quick points. Is that I think the larger issues that affect the middle class is basically the oligarchy that is a slow coup that is attempting to privatize the commons, and these issues of identity politics, racism, religion, immigration, gay marriage, these are simply distractions that the ruling class have used the media to distract the middle class from understanding what's really going on, which is privatization.
Okay, we'll leave it there. I'm not cutting you. I really am not. We only have like 2 minutes left, and we're in the buzzer. But
please call next week.
And you did make your point. That is a good point, and something I wouldn't really completely argue with, actually.
Yeah.
Have a great week. And going to go to the record fair?
I wasn't aware of it, but now I am.
Good.
There you go.
Good. Excellent. Thank you very much. We don't mean to cut you off. I really don't. So let's do our buzzwords now. We only have a couple minutes.
Okay. Well, Cuba. Have you been keeping up what happened in Cuba the last couple
Castro, and now we have a new socialist person there.
A 58-year-old president. What about ambassadors? Are they important?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, all right. Road tolls. Tolls are becoming a big issue in Connecticut.
We need to do something there.
Yeah, it's another way we give away our privacy, too.
It's true.
Oh, okay. To be a journalist.
Not a good profession. It's
very dangerous right now across the world.
It's also a dead field.
Well, that's an oxymoron at this point. San Francisco.
Once a great city, but that's a microcosm of liberalism, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And they have some significant social issues that they're dealing with in terms of homeless and drug abuse and things like that.
And construction issues.
Yeah, liberalism going amok.
Yep.
Next.
Rudy Giuliani.
He's back in the administration. Gentlemen, that concludes another edition of The Buzz. Chris, Marty, A game, and all of our listeners and callers, thanks for calling in. We dropped a couple calls. Great show. Have a great weekend. The weather should be okay. And we'll be back
at the record fair.
Make sure you go to the record fair this Saturday and donate to WESUFM.org.